Imagine walking into a quiet space station wing and finding your 7-year-old child face to face with a creature of legend. A young dragon with eyes like liquid gold leans forward against the glass and answers her tiny hand with a sound no scientist has ever recorded before. Fear tightens your chest, but something stronger whispers that this is not danger. This is destiny. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The memory of that first sight never grew dull. It kept its shape like a bright coin in a pocket you touch without thinking. It began on a slow afternoon tour of Halcyon Ring 3, a patient station with long windows and soft hallway lights. The xenobiology wing was quieter than the rest. Filters hummed. A panel glowed amber. Our daughter Leela stood on her toes to see better, her breath making a small moon on the barrier glass. Behind that transparent wall lay a creature the registry called Specimen C-17, Crimson Juvenile, Draconic Line. The file words felt thin. In the soft station light, the young drake looked like living gemstone. Tiny scales flashed ruby and wine, each one holding a slice of light. The wings were folded and careful. The chest rose and fell in a sleepy rhythm. Then a golden eye opened, bright as morning, and fixed on Leela as if the rest of us were a painting behind her. "Mama," Leela whispered, her hand rising as if pulled by a string. "He looks lonely." Jonas stood back, trying to be cautious without alarming anyone. Mira, steady, practical, always watching for sharp corners, placed a gentle hand on Leela's shoulder. "We only came to see the small ones," she said, her voice soft. "Little sand foxes, glow mice, nothing that breathes sparks." The young drake lifted his head. The motion set 100 red lights alive. He pressed his snout near the barrier, not touching, just close. Leela pressed her palm to the glass, and to the surprise of every adult in that corridor, the dragon chirped, a clear tone like water on metal. The sound carried through the wall and wrapped the air in a kind of peace. It was not loud. It was undeniable. A door hissed. Dr. Halden Murr hurried in, tablet under one arm, hair escaping its neat tie. He stopped, eyes widening, and the measured calm of a scientist trembled for a heartbeat. 15 years, he murmured. I have never seen C-17 initiate contact like this. He glanced at Leela. May I ask your name? Lila, she said, without taking her eyes away from the golden ones beyond the glass. His name is Ember. The registry has no personal name, Dr. Murr said slowly, yet he made a note, as if the naming were a fact to be filed. Most juveniles project simple feelings. Not all children can hear them so clearly. He turned to Mira and Jonas. You should know the rules before your hearts run too far. Class 3 species require permits, climate control, safety checks. They need warmth, UV cycles, and room to grow into themselves. Mira nodded, the set of her shoulders saying she was already weighing what might be possible. Jonas asked careful questions about size, diet, and learning. The answers were not small. Ember would not be small. But as they spoke, the dragon lowered his head to the very level of Lila's eyes and hummed again. Lila smiled, and something in the room changed shape. Fear slid a little to the edge, making room for interest. A soft alarm pulsed on the wall, only a test. Still, the light startled the drake. His scales tightened, then eased. Leela flinched, then steadied, pressing her hand flat, with a bravery that tangled up Jonas's breath. Dr. Murr watched it all, eyes bright. I will not tell you what to do, he said at last, but I will say this. C-17 has met many visitors. He has never sung first. They left the wing promising only to think, and thinking filled the corridor. the elevator, the walk home. In their small unit with its window to the stars, they did sums and made lists. Food, flooring, sunlight bulbs, permits, inspections, training, unknowns. Between figures and forms, Leela drew a dragon with a gentle eye and a tail that made room for a child to sit safely in its curve. That night, the station drifted into its quiet cycle, lights lowered. The air seemed to deepen. Mira woke once with a start, not from a noise, but from a feeling. The way you wake when someone you love calls without sound. She found Lila at the window, watching the thin line of the planetary ring. "Can we try?" Lila asked. "If it is wrong, we can change our minds. But if we never try, Ember will never know what we could have been." Mira knelt and wrapped her in a long hug. Jonas stood behind them, a shape in the light from the window. "We will try," he said. The words felt like stepping onto a new road. Not safe, not foolish, simply true. The next days were a rush, forms in triplicate. Visits from Tech Officer Priya Anand, who measured corners and smiled at Lila's questions. A neighbor, Ossian Cade, showed up with tools and quiet muscle to reinforce the floor frame. UV panels went up, humming a sky that was not quite like any sky, yet good enough for a growing set of wings. The food replicator learned a new recipe it would complain about forever. When they returned to the quiet wing with their permit, the young Drake lifted his head as if he had heard them coming through 3 doors and a corridor. Leela pressed her palm to the glass. The chirp came again, clear as a bell, and this time even Jonas felt the thought behind it, simple and bright as a single flame. Home. And so the barrier opened. The day Ember crossed the threshold, the apartment felt smaller and larger at once. He was not huge, yet he was not small. The ridges along his neck caught the light like tiny lanterns. His claws clicked on the reinforced panels, careful steps that tried not to be loud. Mira stood with a calm face and fast hands, guiding him toward the room they had remade. Heat coils, UV lamps, a false rock ledge, a wide window built from clear alloy that sang when the station turned. Lila did not rush. She walked a few steps ahead, glancing back to be sure he followed. Ember lowered himself, belly near the floor, a gesture of trust that needed no translation. Jonas felt his list of worries reshuffle. Some items grew teeth, some lost them. That first evening, Dr. Murr visited to review safety. He showed them the wristbands that synced with habitat locks. He taught them the sign for settle and the sign for still. In a simple gesture language, the Drakes learned well. Lila practiced until Ember responded with a soft rumble and a folded wing. The first night, they found him asleep in his warm room. By morning, the room was empty. Mira checked the hallway, then Lila's door, and stopped there, smiling against her sleeve. Ember had curled on the floor by Lila's bed, tail looped around the frame, head near the pillow without touching it. He woke when Mira breathed in, golden eye blinking. He did not move. He understood the rules about sleeping children. "He thinks this is the safest place," Jonas said later, and Dr. Murr agreed. "Many young Drakes sleep in packs," the scientist said. "Close feels like safety." Days found a rhythm. Ember learned to wait at thresholds and to keep his tail from sweeping cups from tables. He learned that the oven was not a sunrise and that hover toys belonged to Leela unless offered. He learned that a tiny tap of a claw could point at the right answer when Leela struggled on her tablet. He seemed pleased by numbers. He was less impressed by spelling. Neighbors peeked in, then stayed for tea. Ossian Cade, who had helped with the floor, visited with a small cart of spare parts in case the UV rigs hum wrong. Priya Anand double-checked the climate software and added an alert for power dips. Drakes get nervous when the heat drops, she said. So do I. Not all moments were gentle. On day 7, a gravity glitch rippled across the station like a shrug from a sleeping giant. The floor softened. Mugs drifted. Leela laughed, delighted, arms wide like a little kite. Then a shelf nudged free from its mount, and a slow parade of books began to float toward her. Ember was moving before any adult could shout. He sprang, claws sliding into the wall seams, anchoring his body like a bridge. He spread his wings in a wide arc that caught the falling things and sent them aside with soft thumps. Leela, pressed to his warm chest, kept laughing until she saw Mira's face and understood the worry. Then she grew very quiet, holding on until the station steadied. Afterward, Jonas checked every mount and bracket twice. Mira held Leela for a long time on the couch while Ember sat on the rug, still as a stone, eyes on the child, as if watching the air itself for trouble. When Leela finally fell asleep, Ember stayed, unblinking, until the room slipped into the low blue light of evening. There were small problems. The replicator hated the nutrient crystal recipe and would groan each time Ember's meal was ordered. Too much mineral profile, it complained in a chirp of code. Ossian tweaked it, and the groan turned into a sigh. Ember learned to wait for permission before eating. He did not always enjoy waiting, but he tried, which mattered. At school orientation, some parents stared, then offered cautious smiles. Children were easier. They asked direct questions and wanted to touch the warm scales. Leela showed them how to offer a hand and wait for a nose bump. She explained the sign for still and laughed when Ember demonstrated by not moving at all for a long, silly minute. One evening, a minor power drop dimmed the UV panels. Ember chirped, uneasy. Leela set a small solar lamp next to his ledge and sat with him while Jonas and Mira spoke with maintenance. The lamp threw a soft circle of gold, and within it, the dragon closed his eyes. Leela stayed until he slept, then tiptoed out like a small guardian guarding a larger one. We were afraid, Mira whispered later, forehead resting on Jonas's shoulder as they watched the two of them breathe in the next room. I'm still afraid sometimes. Me too, Jonas said, but I think fear is only one of the things we feel. It doesn't get to be the only one. The next morning, they woke to a chirp and a surprise. Ember had learned a new trick overnight. On the floor, arranged in small nutrient crystals, were 3 tidy shapes: a circle, a line, and a tiny heart. Leela laughed and clapped. Jonas took a photo. Mira simply looked at the dragon and whispered, "Thank you for trying to meet us where we are." The apartment felt more like a home than it ever had, a place shaped by care. Even the replicator's sigh sounded fond. Years do not always feel like years. Sometimes they feel like a row of small mornings that add up only when you look behind you. Lila grew taller. Ember grew into his frame, 8 feet from warm nose to tail tip, wings wide enough to make shade across the living room. He did not outgrow his gentleness. School brought new kinds of math and more complicated feelings. There were days when Lila came home bright and talkative, telling stories about group projects and a science lab that smelled like clean rain. There were other days when she shut her tablet with a snap and stared at the window as if it could explain people. Ember, who understood numbers better than social puzzles, learned to sit close without pressing. Sometimes he knocked the right answer with a claw. Sometimes he did nothing at all, and that helped in a different way. Teasing came once, the ordinary kind that hurts because it is ordinary. A pair of older kids made jokes about lizard leashes and pet babysitters. Lila told no one at first. Ember knew. He had a way of listening to her silence. One afternoon, he positioned himself just inside the school's public entry, very still, eyes low, posture calm. When the teasing began, he lifted his head and made a sound so soft most people did not hear it. The two older kids did. They did not tease again. Later, Mira spoke to the school about kinder corridors. The principal agreed. Rules are easier than empathy, but both help. A winter cycle brought a fever. Leela's cheeks burned, and the room felt too bright and too far away. Ember pressed close, not touching until Mira nodded. Then, the dragon curled around the foot of the bed, scales dimming to a cool blue glow. The room's temperature dropped a little. The fever broke in 2 nights. The clinic called it lucky timing. Jonas called it something else and brought home a small banner that said, "Thank you, Mr. Ember," painted in Leela's careful hand. The incident that made the whole station know their names began like a routine maintenance alert. A power coupling in the service corridor near the Academy lab failed and leaked radiation into a cluster of rooms with students inside. Safety doors slammed down. Rescue bots rolled out. The bots, clever but slow, calculated routes. Ember did not calculate. He moved. He was in the corridor before anyone could grab his harness. Jonas ran after him and then stopped because the air monitors on his wrist turned orange and then red. Mira stood beside him, eyes on the live feed. On the screen, Ember slid through a maintenance hatch, wings tucked tight to keep from striking wires. The video caught more than speed. It caught intention. Later, Dr. Merwood explained that juvenile drakes can see parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, like colors. To Ember, the dangerous path must have looked like a storm of bright threads, and the safer path like a dim river. He took the dim river. He reached the lab and flattened himself against the door, spreading his wings along the edges to make a seal. The children inside stared with wide eyes and then moved when Lila shouted instructions through the glass. Ember guided them out, pressing them to walk in his shadow, taking the strongest light on his own scales. The rescue bots met them at the end of the corridor and finished the job. In the medbay afterward, Ember dozed while Tex tended to small burns along his wing membranes. Lila lay on her side on a narrow cot, facing him, hand pressed to the glass of his treatment pod. Jonas and Mira sat together and counted slow breaths until the beeps of the monitors felt like normal sounds again. The station made a modest fuss, a ceremony, a pin that shone like a tiny star on the wide leather collar Ossian sewed for the dragon by hand. The local news drones hovered outside their door and tried to ask questions until Mira held up a palm and said, in a voice soft enough to be kind and firm enough to be final, "Not today." Leela found words later. "I want to learn how to care for beings who care for us," she told Jonas as they sat on the observation deck. "Not as pets, as partners. I want to study xenocare and interspecies trust." It was a big wish that somehow felt like a small decision, as if the road had been turning that way all along. Applications filled the next season. Recommendations went out. There were late nights and early mornings, and a lot of tea. When the acceptance from the Earth Academy arrived, Leela cried first, then laughed, then pressed her face against Ember's neck and whispered, "We did it." Earth meant distance. Rules meant no dragons in the dorms. The family sat around a table that had held so many simple dinners and looked at maps and calendars until the ink smudged. Ember rested his head on the edge of the table and watched the humans try to draw a straight line through a world that was round. Leaving is two things at once, joy and ache. The day Lila boarded the shuttle to Earth, she smiled for her parents and for the station photographer and for the new students who felt lost and found at the same time. When she hugged Ember, she did not smile. She pressed her face into his scales and breathed in the warm mineral scent that had been safety for so long. Ember lifted one foreclaw and touched her shoulder very lightly. A gesture he had learned meant go on. I see you. He did not follow her down the ramp. He stood beside Jonas and Mira, chest rising and falling, and watched until the shuttle was a bright seed on a dark field. The first weeks were hard. Ember waited by Lila's door and then remembered she was not behind it. He ate enough, but only enough. Jonas kept the climate warm and the room aired. Mira told stories from the day, so the apartment would remain a place with words in it. Then the first call came, and the whole home changed temperature. The wall screen blinked, and Lila's face filled the room. She wore a borrowed lab coat and a grin that looked too big for her face. "Hi, family," she said, and Ember sprang from the rug with a sound none of them had heard since the first day at the facility, a bright, ringing trill that belonged to beginnings. For an hour, Lila described earth rain and classroom smells, and the way people stared when she said the word dragon with love in it. Ember pressed his nose to the glass, as if scent could cross light. Calls became a thread through each day. Sometimes Ember rang at the wrong time, and a sleepy roommate named Rena waved from a pillow and said, "Good morning, Big Red." Lila sent small research clips and laughed when Ember watched them as if they were sports. He learned the call button and used it to show her pointless things that mattered to him. A balanced bowl, a new way his tail could hold a brush, a painting that looked like a sunrise had melted on purpose. Seasons moved. Ember grew into a luminous adult, scales deepening to a warm crimson glow. Jonas and Mira grew quieter, in a way that happens when a home becomes a waiting room and a garden at the same time. When Lila returned for breaks, the apartment woke like a song heard again. The three of them and the dragon walked the same corridors, visited the same neighbor, thanked the same patient replicator for food it still claimed to dislike. A day Lila graduated in a big hall on Earth, the Academy made a special exception. Ember sat in the audience in a formal collar with his small bravery pin, posture straight, eyes bright. The clip of Lila hugging his wide neck after the ceremony ran across so many screens that Jonas received messages from people he had not seen in years. The words were mostly the same. "I cried. I did not expect to, but I did. Back on Halcyon Ring 3. She used plain words. She said, "This is life with another mind." She said, "There are rules and there is love, and both are work." Ember stood nearby during family tours, never looming, always present, a quiet fact. Time opened its hand again and placed a new person in the middle of the room. Lila and her partner Den welcomed a baby named Ren, small and loud and perfect. The first time Ember met Ren, he lowered his head as if approaching a star you must not blow on. Ren stared, then smiled the way babies do, like a door swinging open by itself. Ember made a soft sound so full of care that Mira had to sit down. From that day, the circle widened. Ember's guard included Ren without ceremony. He became a shade, a heater, a lullaby machine. Ren slept best with one small hand resting on warm scale. Jonas called it the dragon blanket. Lila called it a miracle she had expected. One evening, the home held the kind of quiet that has many breaths in it. Den scrolled through charts. Lila wrote notes with a pencil because typing felt too loud. Mira knitted a tiny hat with a silly tail on top. Jonas watched the lights on the rim of the ring curve like a necklace. Ren dreamed on the couch, curled against Ember's side. The dragon folded a wing very slowly to keep the baby warm. "Do you think he understands legacy?" Lila asked without looking up, voice soft, as if not to wake the room. "I think he understands the shape of belonging," Jonas said. which is what legacy feels like when you are in it. Ember lifted his head, golden eyes catching the reflection of the window stars. A hush fell, the kind that arrives before meaning does. Then, not with a roar or a song, but with a clear pulse of thought that touched Jonas and Mira and Lila at once, Ember spoke in the way his people speak. The thought was simple and exact, warm as tea and steady as a hand you trust. It said, "You chose closeness when distance felt safer. I will keep choosing you." Mira pressed her palm to her mouth. Jonas felt his chest ache in the good way. Lila set her pencil down and blinked fast, then laughed the little laugh she made when too many feelings tried to get through a small door. Ren stirred and made a soft sound. Ember lowered his head again, and the room returned to its gentle noises, the click of needles, the skitter of pencil on paper, the faint song of the UV panels doing their quiet job. News from the center chimed on Lila's tablet. Another family had been matched with a Drake, the 50th this year. She sent a short note of welcome and a list of tips written in very plain words. Start with warmth. Speak softly. Let patience be allowed to take up space. Remember that fear is a small room, and love is a house with more windows than you can count. The stars outside went on being stars. The station turned, and the window showed the same view made new again. Jonas leaned back and watched a grandchild breathe under the shelter of a creature who had once been a mystery behind glass. He thought about the day they were brave in a small way, and how that had become a large life. "Thank you," he said, not sure who he meant. Ember's eye opened halfway, and a quiet, contented rumble rolled through the floor and up into the bones of everyone who lived in that home. It sounded like belonging. It sounded like a promise kept. Fear had been a doorway. Love had walked through and stayed. And in the simple stillness of that night, with Ren warm under a careful wing and the family gathered close, Ember's thought drifted once more, like a lantern passing by on a calm river. We did not stay afraid. We learned the bigger thing. I am here for all of it.